Hey everybody, this is Brian, and we're going to do another Kyosho 4x4 modification. This is one that a number of people have mentioned and talked about, especially since going to the bigger tires and wheels on the Kyosho 4x4, just because of the steering and power of it and stuff like that. I think it's little underpowered for some of the big tires, especially the bigger, real big tires like the ones that come on the SCX24 Jeep, and I think there's some RC four-wheel drive ones and stuff like that. So anyways, we are going to basically change out all the electronics, mainly so that we can get a full-size, full-powered servo. Well, I'll say full-size. It's a micro servo, similar to what you would have in the SCX24. So basically, there's a kit that I make that's got all the replacement parts for so that you can mount your electronics. It doesn't come with the servo. It doesn't come with any electronics, but it'll work with just about anything that'll go in the SCX24. I've had a few. I took the servo out of the SCX24 actually for initial testing. Then I had a few requests for bigger servos that would fit in it. So I found I actually had in this Dromida. It's a pretty cheap little servo. I don't remember how much it was. Maybe like 10 bucks. I got it maybe a couple of years ago, but I had a couple of them, so they were pretty close to the same size as the waterproof ones that some of the people were talking about. So I got it. Only thing is, it's got a huge servo saver on it. It works. It will install. It will function. But I would highly recommend finding a servo, maybe one of the Hitec or Traxxas or something that takes a standard servo head, and then that way you can also use the ball off of the servo in the Kyosho. This here is, I think it actually came off an Atomic four-wheel drive Mini Z, like a BZ or something like that. It almost fits the Kyosho ball joint, but it's ever so slightly small. But it's good enough just to do some testing and stuff with. So until I get me a better servo, this one will do. So that's the main thing, servo. What I'm running here, as far as the rest of the electronics, I've already installed them 2 or 3 times, so I've got them bundled together. I've soldered in a motor to small, I'm not sure exactly what ESC this is, but it's just a small brushed ESC. I've got a KR 431T. It's to work with my Synchro radio. So it's actually a 4-channel and has telemetry, which is pretty cool. So I don't have any sensors or anything on it, but that's a nice little feature there for that. And then I'm just running a small 250 milliamp 7.4 volt 2-cell lipo. I haven't really tested for runtime, but the power out of this with the Kyosho motor and stuff is great. So between that and of course I think this is a little bit lighter weight, especially from going to the lipo, and the power of the steering is pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into doing the install. You may see me fast forward through certain pieces where I'm taking stuff apart, but I'll try to stop it and talk about a few of the pieces that you might want to watch out for. So first thing is to get the electronics out of the Kyosho, and there's a few tricks to doing that. So first, let's just remove the front shock. You have to remove that one really to get the bumper off. All right. I'll go ahead and do the same thing on the back. You don't have to remove that one to take the bumper off, it's just easier. So yeah, and let's pop that little ball joint off. Now if you notice, the only thing really that's keeping it on the chassis, or keeping it sort of semi-attached to it, are these wires that go down through here. So all we're going to do is remove these two screws. It actually holds the transmission and the chassis together. After you do that, that whole side is actually going to come off. These wires are in a channel up in here. I'll just gently remove those. And there we go. There's all the electronics for the 4x4. You know what? I'm going to remove this pinion. This is actually my 8-tooth pinion that I'm using with the 8-tooth spacer, wherever it got to. Here we go. 8-tooth spacer. Those are available on my eBay listings, and you can always contact me if you've got questions. But I'm going to put that back on there in the end, so set those aside. Alright, so this thing's pretty much disassembled. What we're going to do, we'll go ahead and put this chassis here back together. We don't have any wires we're going to run through that area, so it'll just make it a little easier to get back together, I think. It just takes two of the shorter screws. And as far as this kit and this modification goes, there's no drilling or modifications you have to do to the actual Kyosho 4x4, such as drilling a chassis or cutting parts that came with it or anything like that. I try to make most of my kits where they're pretty much bolt-on, mainly meaning that you can always reverse it and take it back to factory stock, just like it was out of the box if you want to. Just make sure you save any of your other parts that may be removed. So, all right, so there we go. I'm gonna set the bumpers aside for just a second. The chassis, you see, is just a free-floating chassis now. So let's start with the tell you what, let's go ahead and put the back piece is really just a plate. It's so that you can mount the electronics and stuff into it. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide it. You know what, need to make sure, if you can see this, there's two holes a little closer together here and one further apart. This one's going to go closest to the chassis, and then the other two are back there where the bumper goes. So let's go ahead and slide that in. We'll take two short screws and we'll put these back ones in first. We'll go ahead and get the back bumper. And actually, we'll attach that. Make sure you use not the super long screws, but the medium screws. And these are all the screws the original screws that came out of the chassis. We haven't started using any of the ones that came with the kit. Alright, so the back is basically together. So now let's work on getting the front part. What we'll start with, you've basically got two sides, a left and a right. If you notice, there are holes. These are where the shocks will connect. You've got screw holes here, and that's where the servo arms can be connected. So It actually comes with 4 of these connectors. If you notice, there's sort of an indentation here. It'll mount to the upright through here. This indentation is so that you can either put them like this and it'll be closer together for maybe a narrower servo, or you can put them like this and they're further apart, so that might accommodate a wider servo. So I'm gonna actually, I believe this one needs them in the wider position, so I'm gonna install them that way. What I'll do is I'm first gonna attach it. This is where the screws that are included with the kit come in. I'm going to use them to attach the servo to the arms. And you're probably just, depending on the shape and size of your servo, you may have to play around with the orientation on these. I've used this one enough to where I know which way it goes in. So you may want to have them below the servo tabs. You may want to have them above. The screw can come up from underneath, from up above. So so you just want to play around with that and see what fits best. I'm going to go ahead and attach this to the servo upright before I actually mount it to the chassis. Pretty good. Alright, so now we're going to take this. Again, it's sort of like the other one. It's pretty obvious which way this needs to go. There's where the shock mounts are going to go. Also, take note, there are some little grooves here, and that's so that we can put a rubber band underneath the battery location. So I use sort of a rubber band and some heavy duty plastic top Velcro. I'm going to go ahead and put this back piece in first, just like we did in the back, in the rear. Alright, sort of, it'll rotate a little bit like a hinge. Now what we're going to do is got it on there correctly. Put it right between the chassis. And again, this is where playing around with the servo mounting locations and stuff will come in, because your servo may be wider or narrower, and you may just have to play around with it some. So, all right, now get the bumper on there. So this is probably the trickiest part, really, the whole thing. Besides once you figure out where the servo needs to be, you could almost use a couple of hands so I can get the bumper lined up and the screws started into the new frame piece. So Alright, the other piece, let's see, let's go ahead and put the battery tray on. I've just found this small little rubber band. I'm sure there's probably some other tops out there, but just going to slip that around, sort of get it right there in that groove. Use some more screws that came with the kit. And those should line up right there. Yeah, you probably don't even need all 4 of them in there. There's 4 for the tray, but you can put them in there if you feel like it might. If you got, I guess maybe if you got a real big lipo battery in there of some sort, maybe it'll bounce out, but now there's probably optional a cross brace for the shock towers, mainly just in case, you know, there's extra pressure or something like that, but or if they're pushing in a little bit, you can install them. This brace, it just sort of separates them. And actually, I like to run my servo cable, sort of tuck it in back behind there, and then put the brace on. There we go. And 2 screws are optional. You can put them in there if you want to. I'll go ahead and put them in there just for completeness. But main thing is to have 1 in there just so that it keeps that brace in place. Again, all that does is just keep them from pushing in. Alright, so we've got servo mounted, we've got all the mounting locations mounted. I'm just going to run this cable over through here, and I already know that my electronics plug-in is going to end up on that side. So alright, so let's take the motor. I use this type of Velcro. Holds a little better than the fuzzy kind. It's hard on both sides, snaps together. It's a little thicker, stuff like that, but I just like the ease of use. So I'm just going to stick that down there. My wiring isn't necessarily the prettiest in the world, so please just ignore a little bit of that. So there's that. That 9-tooth pinion back on there. And if you haven't seen it, I've got another video that shows the modification so that you can put a 7, 8, 9 pinion on. So if you're interested in that, especially if you're using big tires and a stock motor, then might help out. Okay, finally. Okay, electronics are in it. Put me a little bit of my extra heavy duty Velcro on this side. Oh, and as far as what I was mentioning about the ball, this servo head did not have a small hole on it to hold the one that came on the Kyosho set. It'll unscrew, excuse me, and it would go into a regular servo head. Like I say, this is got a really big hole, so I found this other one and actually pounded it in there. So my recommendation would be to get a proper servo head, well, proper servo with a proper servo head, so that you can reuse that ball that came on there. As you'll see, this one just barely snaps on there. It's enough to turn the wheels and stuff, but I wouldn't do any heavy duty four-wheeling. I'm gonna get a different servo and put in here. So that should have it. Let's power it on. Alright, everything checks out functional. And one thing you will need to be careful of when you are picking out servos, probably want to do some research and determine their length. Because if you look here, this servo that I've got mounted pretty much just about as low as it would go. I could actually make it go a little bit lower. But if you look, see if I can get some good light. I don't know if I've got good enough light, but right up in here, it's actually touching the hood, the inside hood of that Toyota. So it doesn't quite want to let me put the body on completely without forcing it just a little bit. So that's one thing you want to watch out for, is lengthwise. Now again, I could probably lower it that a little bit. I don't want to, because this servo head is so big that the suspension and stuff may actually go up and hit it. So that pretty much gets it. Let's put some bling back on it, and definitely a lot more power than it had before. Alright. So in the steering, does pretty good. It's pretty strong even with that little servo that I've got. So there we go. That pretty much wraps that up. Again, the key thing is finding a good servo. For measurement purposes, the one that I've got in here, the case on it, height, is close, just shy of 22 millimeters. Now, the key is basically how much you've got between the tab that's on the side and the back right there. So that's right, that's very close to 19.5 millimeters. So you want to watch for those specs. It will take a little bit of deviation with the width. This one's about 12.5 millimeters wide. That seems like it's pretty standard. A lot of them are going to fall within this range. The only thing is if you get some of those super heavy duty ones and stuff like that, I think they may actually go over that length there for 20 millimeters. Some of them, what you'll see is they'll measure all the way from the top of where the servo head goes to there. So if you measure this one that way, it's around 27.5 millimeters. So I think if you get one that is around 30 millimeters. That's probably the max you can go, and you'll just have to make sure that the tabs will actually fit the mounting positions on here. So anyway, so that should be pretty much it. Can't wait to see what some people do with these and have some fun with probably some waterproofing and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So anyways, be sure to check out my other videos, my other scale accessories like the magnetic roof rack, stuff like that, hex adapters for the wheels. I'm working on some a line of wheels that direct mount. Not sure who all will be interested in those, but I've sent a few prototypes out now and see if I can start getting some feedback on those. So anyways, if you've got any questions, feel free to let me know. Other than that, have a good one and keep on crawling.